Okay, so to begin with, we're solving for x. We see triangles, and I see the measurements of the angles, and I'm supposed to solve for x. All right, let me show you guys something pretty cool. Now I have this program. Let me share this program. I have a triangle that it measures the angles of my triangle. If I move my points, for you guys to see, my numbers change. It is measuring real time. So if I move them, you guys can see, I'm just going to show you guys that the numbers change. Like I said, it is measuring the angles at this time, in real time. You guys can grab a protractor, measure it, and you guys will see it is the exact angle. Now, one thing that I want to do pretty quick, notice how I measure my angles and I have my 3 angles there, but I'm going to go here. Let's see. I'm going to calculate. This is also a calculator. So let me calculate. Let me add the 3 angles. Let me add the first angle plus the second angle. Notice how it added the first 2 angles already. I have 117.859. However, I want to add all 3 angles. And it says 180. Let me move my angles. Remember, my angles change. The interesting part, notice at the very bottom where I did the addition, when I add the 3 angles, it is still 180. Notice I'm moving my angles. And the 180 does not change. Now, one cool thing is that we call this the triangle angle sum theorem. As it makes sense, we're going to add the angles of a triangle, right? Is the rule when we add the angles of a triangle. Triangle angle sum theorem says when you add the 3 angles of a triangle, no matter which triangle you're adding, the angles always add up to 180. You guys decide right now, right? I changed my angles, but it is always equal to 180. Having that said, let's take a look at our examples. We can solve for our homework now. Solve for x. I'm going to add the 3 angles, and it is going to equal to 180. All right, so let's see. I'm just going to add everything, right? If I add my simple numbers, I'm going to combine. I can just write this as x plus 57 plus 50 plus 80, right? I'm adding everything, and it's going to equal to 180. All right, let me combine my like terms. First, let me separate them through the equal sign. Let me combine my like terms. When it comes to letters, I just have x. When it comes to non-letters, I have 57 plus 50 plus 80. Use a calculator if you need to. This gives me 187. And this is equal to 180. So I have that x plus 187 equals 180. I want the x by itself, right? I'm solving for x. So the plus 187, I'm going to cancel it out. Cool thing in math, we can cancel it out as long as we write it on the other side with the opposite sign. So instead of plus 187, let me write it on the other side as a minus 187. Right, your algebra teacher, they mentioned opposite operations, remember? So yeah, we cancel it out and we write it on the other side with the opposite sign. Okay, so here I have that x, it's equal to 180 minus 187. Well, that gives me -7. So x equals -7. On my homework, I just want you to type in the number, so just -7. All right, that was nice. Question number 2. Let me add everything. I'm going to go x plus 53 plus 46 plus 90. This is equal to 180. That little box, that represents 90. Right? Even though I don't see a number, every time I see a box for the corner, that's how we represent 90. So that is 90. Okay. So let me solve for x, right? So when it comes to x, when it comes to letters, just x. When it comes to numbers, I have 53 plus 46 plus 90. Let's see, that's 189. And so this is all equal to 180. Again, I want the x by itself, so the plus 189, let me write it on the other side as a minus 189. So I get that x is equal to negative 9. All right, 180 minus 189 gave me negative 9. Same idea for number 3. Let me add everything. X plus 43 plus 70 plus 75. It is equal to 180. Remember, we just learned the rule that when you add the 3 angles of a triangle, it always adds up to 180. All right, letter-wise, I just have an x. So just x. Numbers-wise, 43 plus 70 plus 75. That is 188. And all this is equal to 180. The plus 188, let me move it to the other side as a minus 188. So I get that x is equal to negative 8. X can be negative. The angle is positive, right? If you plug in negative 8 plus 43, you're going to get a positive number. The angle is positive, but x, it's okay if it is negative. Now let's take a look at question number 4. Question number 4. Let me add everything. 48 plus 8x plus 9 plus 59, and this is equal to 180. We separate them through the equal sign. When it comes to letters, I have 8x. Number-wise, I have 48 plus 9 plus 59. Okay, 48 plus 9 plus 59, I know it's 116. So let me write plus 116. And all of this is equal to 180. I want the letter by itself. I want the 8x. So the plus 116, let me move it over as a minus 116. So I get that 8x is equal to positive 64. Right, 180 minus 116 is 64. I don't quite have x by itself. There's an 8 in front of it. So now, to get rid of the 8, let me divide by 8. Because 8x basically means multiplied. The opposite of multiplication is division. So let me divide by 8. So that gives me that x equals 64 divided by 8. Well, that's 8. It's a pretty cool thing. The 3 angles of a triangle added up to 180. Now, if you guys don't believe me, I'm gonna tell you guys about a cool experiment you guys can do. All right, get a triangle, get a piece of paper and cut a triangle, any triangle. Let's say I do this real quick. Cut a triangle. If you want to shade the corners, like if you guys don't believe me, you guys can try this at home. Shade the corners and then cut them out. All right, cut the paper like here, here, and here. You're gonna cut the corners and put them together. That will be like one corner here. There will be a second corner about here. And there will be a third corner right here. Interesting though, is that the corners, they make half of a circle. Right? Don't we know that a circle is 360? So the half of a circle, shouldn't that be 180? Like I said, it will happen. It will happen. So if you guys want to try it at home, go for it. Try it. All right, now let's continue. Now let's take a look at this one. It says find the measure of each angle indicated. All right, so in this figure, there is a question mark. I want you to solve for that side. I want you to solve for that angle. For this moment, let me call this question mark. Let me call it x. Back in Algebra 1, you guys learned that when we don't know the value of something, we call it a letter, usually x. Now, another thing I'm going to tell you guys is that I'm going to give you guys more than one triangle. The triangle where x is, don't start there. Start at the other triangle. So my focus right now is at this triangle. Remember how the three angles of a triangle add up to 180? I have two angles. I can find the third angle. All right. I'm going to add the two angles that I have, 80 and 50. Add them up. 80 plus 50. That's going to give us 130. Like I said, I added the angles, and I'm going to subtract this from 180. 180 minus 130 is 50. So that means that this angle is 50. Add the three angles if you don't believe me. 50 plus 50 plus 80. It should add up to 180. Okay, so start from you see where the X is? Start from the other triangle. Another rule that I remembered is that when there's an X formed, I see my X here, opposite angles are equal. So based on that angle, we call that vertical angle theorem, remember? Based on that angle, I'm gonna call this 50. So that angle's 50. I can solve for X now. Notice how now my focus is gonna be on this triangle. I have two angles, and I'm solving for the third angle. So I'm gonna add the two angles that I have, 85 plus 50, right? Add them up, 85 plus 50. It's not 135. Let me subtract that from 180. The reason why I subtract from 180, because remember, all three angles have to add up to 180. I know 180 minus 135 is 45. So that means this angle is 45. So X equals 45. All right, that was nice. Let's take a look at question number 6. The question mark, it's X. I'm gonna call it X. Because again, when we don't know the value of something, we call it a letter. So I'm gonna call it X. The triangle where X is not the triangle where I'm going to start. Instead, I'm gonna start at this other triangle. That triangle, I know two angles, 63 and 58. And I want to add those two angles. 63 plus 58 is 121. Again, I added the two angles, 63 plus 58. Let me subtract this from 180 because the three angles of a triangle add up to 180. So that gives me 59. That means that this third angle is 59. To double check, if you want to add the three angles, 59 plus 58 plus 63, it should equal 180. Now, another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use these three angles. It looks like I told you guys that the three angles of a triangle we're going to do, right? If we put all the three angles together, remember I said it was going to add up to 180. What I mean with that is, remember the rule, the experiment that I mentioned. You guys see my three angles? Should add up to 180. So coming back to this image, those three corners should add up to 180. So I know two of them, 59 and 57. So let me add those two. 59 plus 57 is 116. I'm going to subtract this from 180. And that gives me 64. So this corner is 64. Okay, now I'm ready for me to solve for X. I'm looking at this triangle. I know two angles, 64 and 74. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add the two angles that I know, 64 plus 74, that's 138. Let me subtract this from 180. And that gives me 42. So this third angle is 42. Pretty cool. All right, let's take a look at number 7. That question mark, I call it x. I'm solving for x. I see the triangle where x is, and that is not the triangle where I start. I start at the other triangle. So I'm going to start at this triangle. From that triangle, I know two angles, 34 and 28. If I add 34 plus 28, I know I get 62. Let me subtract that from 180. The reason why I subtracted from 180, again, because all three angles add up to 180. So I added 62. I needed to know how much more, or I needed to add to 180. So in this case, 118. So I'm going to say this angle is 118. I remember vertical angle theorem. Remember, when there's an x, opposite angles are equal. I see there's an x right here. So I'm going to say this angle is 118 based on the vertical angle theorem. Now, I'm looking at this triangle. I know two angles, 118 and 36. If I add 118 plus 36, I get 154. Let me subtract that from 180. And that gives me 26. So that means that angle, so x equals 26. Let's take a look at question number 8. That question mark, let me call it x. And I'm going to start from the triangle that does not have x. Looking at this triangle, the box, the red box, remember that represents 90. I know two angles. I know two angles of a triangle. I'm able to find the third angle. 90 plus 60 is 150. Right? I added the two angles that I have, 90 and 60. Let me subtract that from 180. I know 180 minus 150 is 30. So it means this third angle right here is 30. Cool. Now I'm going to be looking at, here's 30, here's 80. I can find this third angle. Because these three angles, they make half of a circle. So they must add up to 180. Right? The two angles that I have, 80 and 30, if I add them, is 110. Let me subtract that from 180. So that gives me that this third angle is 70. Okay. Now I'm going to be able to solve for x. Because I'm looking at this triangle. I know two angles, 70 and 85. Let me add 70 plus 85. That gives me 155. Let me subtract that from 180. And that gives me 25. So I know x equals 25. You guys might be like, man, I'm using a lot of 180. Yeah, because I'm using the three angles of a triangle. I know the three angles of a triangle add up to 180. So that's why I keep on using the 180 a lot. Now looking at question number 9, that question mark, I'm going to call it x. So I'm going to solve for x. And remember I said earlier, the triangle that has x, that's not where you're going to start. You're going to start at the other triangle. So I'm looking at this triangle. I know two angles of that triangle. 25, and 100. If I add them up, it's 125. Right? I added those two angles. And then let me subtract this from 180. 180 minus 125. I know it's 55. So that means that this third angle here, it is 55. Remember vertical angle theorem. When there's an X, opposite angles are equal. So I see there's an X here. So I'm gonna say this angle is 55 based on the vertical angle theorem. And then let me take a look at this triangle. In order for me to solve for X, I must know two angles of that triangle. And I do, 55 and 69. 55 plus 69, I know it's 124. Let me subtract this from 180. I know that's 56. So X equals 56. Okay, lastly, let's take a look at question number 10. That question mark, let me call it X. Let me take a look at the triangle that does not have X. I'm looking at the two angles that I have, 30 and 65. Add them up. 30 plus 65. I'm going to call that 95. Let me subtract this from 180. And that gives me 85. So that means this third angle is 85. Remember, the three angles of a triangle must add up to 180. I know this other angle right here, it is 85. Vertical angle theorem. When there's an X, opposite angles are equal. Now, let me take a look at the triangle where X is. In order for me to be able to solve for X, I must know two of my angles, and I do, 85 and 39. I know 85 plus 39 is 124. Let me subtract this from 180. 180 minus 124 is 56. So X equals 56. Pretty cool, huh?